Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling that voice inside, the inner critic, negative self-talk.
Yeah, that relentless commentary. It's something so many of us deal with.
Absolutely. And you shared this great guide from Self Sensei, Overcoming Negative Self-Talk.
Right. It gives a really practical, step-by-step approach.
So our mission today is to kind of pull out the key stuff, the actionable steps from that guide to help you cultivate, well, a kinder inner voice.
Exactly. We'll break down what it is, why it happens, the impact, and crucially, that 5-step plan they lay out. Plus, how to make it stick.
Perfect. Let's get straight into it then. What exactly is negative self-talk? What are we dealing with here?
Okay, so at its core, it's that internal chat track that's critical, negative, maybe even punishing.
Like telling yourself I'm not good enough or...
Precisely. Or I always mess things up. That was stupid.
Yeah.
It often feels automatic, like this background noise.
Yeah, almost like a habit you don't even realize you have sometimes.
That's a key point the guide makes. It becomes habitual. And it's different from, say, healthy self-reflection where you're learning and growing.
How so?
Well, negative self-talk is harsh, it's relentless, it doesn't really lead to constructive change, it just uh, chips away at your self-esteem, it kind of clouds your judgment about yourself.
And it's not just about feeling down, is it? The guide mentions broader impacts.
Oh, definitely. The consequences can be really far-reaching. We're talking increased stress, anxiety, even depression. It can strain relationships, too.
Relationships, how does that work?
Well, if you're constantly down on yourself, you might withdraw or become overly needy or maybe hypersensitive to what others say. That puts pressure on things.
Makes sense. And you mentioned physical health earlier. That seems surprising.
Yeah, it does. But think about chronic stress. Constant negativity keeps that stress response activated.
Ah, the fight or flight thing.
Sort of, yeah. And prolonged stress is linked to sleep problems, digestive issues, maybe even a weaker immune system or cardiovascular strain over time. It's that mind-body connection.
Wow. Okay, so this inner critic isn't just unpleasant, it can have real, tangible effects.
Exactly. And another huge point the guide stresses is that this negativity often isn't based on reality.
What do you mean?
It's usually based on a distorted view, skewed perceptions. These come from common, flawed thinking patterns, what psychologists call cognitive distortions.
Cognitive distortions. Okay, so our thoughts aren't always telling us the truth.
Not necessarily, especially the really negative critical ones. They're often just bad mental habits.
Yeah.
Recognizing that gap between the thought and the actual facts is like a major first step.
That's actually really hopeful.
It is.
Yeah.
Because the good news is this isn't a fixed personality trait. The guide is really clear. You can manage it. You can change it. It takes awareness, practice, patience.
Okay, so let's talk about those cognitive distortions, these flawed thinking patterns. What are some common ones?
Right. Think of them as predictable biases in how our minds process things. Mental shortcuts that often end up negative. They're common, but when they're excessive, they're linked to poor mental health.
So they're like glitches in our thinking.
Kind of, yeah. And they feed off each other. The guide gives a great example. A small mistake happens.
Okay.
First, you might personalize it. This is my fault.
Yeah.
Then maybe you label yourself, I'm such an idiot.
Uh-huh.
Then it escalates to catastrophizing. Now the whole thing's ruined. And maybe you overgeneralize. I always screw up. See how it snowballs.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That sounds familiar. One little thing triggers a whole avalanche of negativity.
Exactly. But the flip side is, if you can catch and challenge one of those steps, you can break the chain.
Okay, so let's break them down. You mentioned filtering or a mental filter.
Yeah, filtering. This is where you zoom in on the negative details of a situation and ignore all the positive ones.
Right.
Like you have great presentation, get loads of compliments, but you obsess over the one tiny stumble you made or the one question you couldn't answer perfectly. The positive stuff just gets, well, filtered out.
So you don't get credit for the good stuff in your own mind. Frustrating. What else?
Then there's personalization. We touched on that.
Right, blaming yourself for things.
Yeah, taking responsibility for external events that you have little or no control over, or assuming someone's neutral comment is actually a dig at you.
Like if plans get canceled, you automatically think it's because they didn't want to see you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if it was a scheduling conflict totally unrelated to you, it leads to unnecessary guilt, erodes self-esteem.
Okay. What about catastrophizing? That sounds dramatic.
It is. Catastrophizing is basically jumping to the worst possible conclusion, expecting disaster.
So like you make a typo in an email and think, I'm going to get fired.
Pretty much. Or a minor headache becomes, it must be a brain tumor. It really fuels anxiety, and sometimes you can kind of make it happen because you're so worried.
Turning molehills into mountains. Got it. Next.
Black and white thinking, also called all or nothing or polarized thinking.
So no shades of gray.
None. Things are either perfect or a total disaster. You're either a success or a complete failure. If you get a B on a test, it's like failing.
That sounds exhausting. Setting impossible standards.
It really is. It leads to chronic dissatisfaction. Then there's overgeneralization.
Okay, what's that one?
That's taking a single negative event and turning it into a never-ending pattern.
Like one bad date means I'll never find anyone.
Exactly. Or one tough job interview means I'm terrible at interviews, I'll never get a good job. It makes you feel hopeless and stops you from even trying sometimes.
So one data point becomes a universal law. Ouch. What else?
Should statements. These are those rigid internal rules about how you or others should act.
I should exercise more. I shouldn't have eaten that.
Yep, or people should be more considerate. When reality doesn't match the should, you feel guilty or angry or resentful. It puts immense pressure on yourself and others. Unrealistic expectations.
Right. Creates a lot of internal conflict. What about mind reading?
Mind reading. This is assuming you know what other people are thinking, and spoiler alert, you usually assume it's negative about you.
Without any real evidence.
Exactly. Someone looks serious during your presentation and you think, they hate my idea. But maybe they're just concentrating or had a bad morning. It causes a lot of social anxiety.
Yeah, reacting to something that might not even be real. Okay, what's next?
Emotional reasoning. This is a tricky one. It's believing that whatever you feel must be true.
So, I feel anxious, therefore the situation is dangerous.
Precisely. Or, I feel inadequate, so I must be incompetent. Your feelings become the evidence, even if the facts contradict them. It really distorts your judgment. Feelings are valid, but they aren't always facts about the world.
That's a really important distinction. Feeling isn't fact. Okay, nearly there.
Just a couple more key ones, labeling and mislabeling. This is like an extreme version of overgeneralization.
How so?
Instead of saying, I made a mistake, you attach a harsh global label. I am a failure. I am stupid.
Wow. Defining your whole self by one action.
Exactly. It creates this fixed negative self-image and makes it really hard to learn from mistakes. You just feel inherently flawed.
That sounds incredibly damaging. And the last one.
Magnification and minimization, sometimes called discounting the positive or the binocular trick.
Magnifying the bad, minimizing the good.
You got it. You blow your mistakes way out of proportion, magnification, and shrink your successes down, saying they were luck or no big deal, minimization.
So you obsess over a tiny error but brush off a major compliment.
Exactly. It stops you from building real confidence because you never internalize the positives. The guide actually has a handy table summarizing all these, which is useful.
That's a lot of ways our thinking can get twisted. Just knowing these names helps make them feel less powerful somehow.
It really does. Awareness is huge.
So, okay, we see how it happens, but let's talk more about the cost.
Yeah.
Why is tackling this so important? You mentioned mental health.
Yeah, the link is really strong. Persistent negative self-talk is heavily associated with increased anxiety, stress, and especially depression. It can be both a symptom and a cause, creating this downward spiral.
How does that spiral work?
Well, the negative thoughts fuel bad feelings, which makes you more likely to have negative thoughts. And round it goes. It's also linked to things like PTSD, OCD, social anxiety, even eating disorders in some research. It's not trivial.
Definitely not. And what about just our general sense of self, our confidence?
It absolutely erodes self-esteem and confidence. If you're constantly telling yourself you're not good enough, eventually you believe it. It makes it so hard to see your strengths, trust your abilities, or, go for that promotion or ask someone out.
It's like having a bully living inside your head, constantly putting you down.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it spills over into relationships, as we touched on. That insecurity can make you withdrawn or maybe clingy or quick to misinterpret things negatively. It creates friction.
Right. Hard to have healthy connections when you're feeling bad about yourself. What about getting things done? Productivity, goals.
Huge impact there. Think about perfectionism, fear of failure, self-doubt, all fueled by negative self-talk. They lead straight to procrastination, lack of motivation, difficulty concentrating. You might avoid challenges or risks because you're afraid you'll fail, which limits your growth, both personally and professionally.
So the inner critic can literally hold you back from achieving things.
Absolutely. And again, that physical health link, the chronic stress isn't good for our bodies long term. Sleep, digestion, immunity. It's all connected.
It really seems to touch every part of
It
life.
does. And one more thing the guide highlights is the risk of self-fulfilling prophecies.
How does that work?
If you constantly tell yourself, I'm going to bomb this presentation, you might get so anxious you do perform poorly. Or if you think, nobody will like me at this party, you might act awkwardly or withdrawn, which could lead people to keep their distance. Your beliefs influence your actions, which can influence the outcome.
Wow, so our inner world can actually shape our outer reality. That's a
Yeah.
bit scary, but also motivating to change.
Exactly. Which leads us nicely into the action plan.
Yes. The 5 steps from the Self-Sensei Guide. Let's break them down. Step 1 is become the observer. What does that mean?
It means starting to pay attention to your thoughts without immediately buying into them or judging yourself for having them. Just noticing, like becoming a neutral scientist of your own mind.
Why is just noticing so important?
Because you can't change what you're not aware of. Most negative self-talk runs on autopilot. This step is about bringing it into the light. You need to catch it before you can do anything about it.
Okay, so how do we get better at noticing?
The guide suggests a few things. Mindful journaling. Noticing, just pausing throughout the day, checking in. What's my internal monologue saying right now?
Just taking a moment to listen in.
Exactly. Another really powerful one is thought journaling. Writing down the negative thought, what triggered it, how it made you feel, what you did. It helps you see patterns over time.
Ah, so you start to see, oh, every time X happens, I tend to think Y.
Precisely. Which leads to identifying triggers. What situations, people, or even internal states like being tired or stressed tend to set off your inner critic. Knowing your triggers helps you prepare.
Right. You can anticipate it.
And one more technique, which sounds a bit quirky but can work, is to name your critic.
Give it a name, like, okay, Debbie Downer is talking again.
Haha. Exactly like that. It creates psychological distance. It helps you see the thoughts as coming from this character, not as fundamental truths about you. Makes them less personal, less powerful.
I like that. Okay, so step 1, awareness. Observe, notice, identify. What's step 2?
Step 2 is challenge the narrative. Question your thoughts. This is where cognitive restructuring comes in.
So arguing back against the inner critic.
In a way, yes, but strategically. The core idea is thoughts are not facts, especially negative ones driven by those distortions we talked about. You need to examine the evidence.
How do we do that effectively?
The guide uses a simple model. Catch it, check it, change it. Step 1 was catching it. Now we check it. We investigate the thought.
Okay.
One great method is Socratic questioning. Asking yourself probing questions about the thought.
Like what?
Like, what's the actual evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? Am I jumping to conclusions? Is there another way to look at this? What would I tell a friend if they had this thought? Is thinking this way actually helping me?
Those really force you to step back and analyze it, not just accept it.
Exactly. Another technique is gathering evidence more formally. Maybe even write down the for and against columns. You often find the against column is much stronger.
Gets it out of your head and onto paper.
Right. You can also do a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of believing this thought? Usually, the costs feeling bad, avoiding things, far outweigh any perceived benefits.
Makes sense. Any other tools for challenging?
Thought records are very helpful. They're like structured worksheets where you log the situation, the thought, the feeling, the evidence, identify distortions, and then come up with a more balanced alternative thought. Very systematic.
Okay, that sounds really practical. So, step 1, observe. Step 2, challenge. What's step 3?
Step 3 is reframe your thinking. This is about actively cultivating more balanced, realistic, and supportive thoughts to replace the negative ones.
So not necessarily thinking positively all the time, but more realistically, helpfully.
Precisely. The goal isn't toxic positivity or pretending problems don't exist. It's about finding perspective that are actually more accurate and support your well-being, rather than tear it down, replacing harshness with something more constructive and compassionate.
Okay, how do we practice reframing?
You start by developing alternative thoughts. Based on the challenging you did in step 2, you formulate a new thought that's more balanced and evidence-based.
So if the old thought was, I'm going to fail, the reframe might be,
I'm feeling nervous, but I've prepared and I'm capable of doing well. Or, even if it's not perfect, I can handle it and learn from it. It needs to feel believable to you.
right, not just empty positive fluff.
Exactly. Another tool is positive affirmations, but used thoughtfully. Base them on your actual strengths, qualities, past successes. Make them specific and credible.
Like, I handled that difficult conversation well last week, so I have the skills to approach this one.
Perfect example. Also, pay attention to your language. Use gentler language. Swap harsh words like stupid or failure for more descriptive and less loaded terms like I made a mistake or that didn't go as planned.
Language really matters, doesn't it?
Immensely. A great technique is to think like a friend. Ask yourself, what would I say to my best friend if they were saying this about themselves? Then try to offer yourself that same kindness.
We're often so much harder on ourselves than on others.
Aren't we just?
Yeah.
Finally, consciously focus on strengths and achievements. Keep a list, maybe a success jar. Actively counteract that negativity bias by acknowledging the good stuff. The guide has a table with reframing examples too.
Great. So step 3 is actively building a better inner narrative. What's step 4?
Step 4 is anchor in the present practice mindfulness.
Mindfulness. How does that fit in with challenging thoughts?
It works slightly differently. Mindfulness isn't directly about changing the thoughts, but changing your relationship to them. It helps you detach from the endless stream of negativity and rumination.
By focusing on the present moment.
Exactly. When you're truly focused on your breath, or the sensations in your body, or what's happening right now, you're not lost in regrets about the past or worries about the future, which is where negative self-talk often lives.
So it creates distance.
Yes, it creates space. You learn to observe your thoughts. There's that critical thought again, without getting swept away by them. You see them as mental events, not necessarily reality. This makes it easier to then apply the challenging and reframing techniques.
Okay, how do we practice this?
Lots of ways. Mindful breathing is fundamental, just focusing on the in-breath and out-breath. Body scan meditation, bringing awareness to different body parts.
Just noticing sensations.
Yeah, without judgment. You can also observe thoughts non-judgmentally, imagining them like clouds passing by. Acknowledge them, let them go.
Not fighting them, just watching them float past.
Exactly. And mindful engagement in daily activities, bringing full awareness to brushing your teeth, washing dishes, walking. It grounds you in the now. The guide also mentions acceptance, acknowledging difficult thoughts without struggling against them, which can sometimes make them stronger. That's a key idea in ACT therapy.
Okay, mindfulness helps us step back. What's the final step, step 5?
Step 5 is crucial. Embrace self-compassion.
Being kind to yourself.
Yes, it's the direct antidote to self-criticism. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding you'd offer a good friend who was suffering or felt they'd failed.
Why is this so important?
Because we're human, we will make mistakes, we will struggle. Self-criticism just adds another layer of suffering. Self-compassion helps us cope, learn, and be resilient. Dr. Kristen Neff's model highlights 3 components.
What are they?
Self-kindness, being gentle and understanding, versus harsh judgment. Common humanity, recognizing that imperfection and struggle are part of being human. Everyone experiences them, you're not alone. And mindfulness, in this context, holding your pain in balanced awareness, not ignoring it but not exaggerating it either.
That makes sense. Feeling connected rather than isolated in our struggles. How do we cultivate this?
Practice self-compassion phrases like, this is a moment of suffering, may I be kind to myself. Try writing a compassionate letter to yourself, maybe from the perspective of a wise, loving friend.
That sounds powerful.
It can be. Also simple. Comforting physical gestures like a hand on your heart can actually soothe your nervous system. Keeping a gratitude journal or positivity jar helps shift focus. And constantly asking, how would you treat a friend? And applying that to yourself. And finally, practice self-forgiveness for past mistakes. Acknowledge, learn, let go.
Wow, that 5-step plan feels really comprehensive. Awareness, challenge, reframe, mindfulness, self-compassion.
It provides a solid framework. And the guide emphasizes that building lasting change isn't instant. It takes consistency, practice, patience. Progress, not perfection.
Right, it's about rewiring habits.
Exactly. And it helps to nurture supportive lifestyle factors too.
Like what?
Healthy habits, exercise, good food, enough sleep. They all support mental well-being. Creating a positive environment, surrounding yourself with supportive people, limiting exposure to constant negativity.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Practicing gratitude regularly keeps perspective. And don't underestimate humor. Finding lightness can really help buffer stress.
Good reminders. And what if someone feels really stuck, like this is overwhelming?
That's an important point. The guide stresses knowing when to seek professional support. If the negative thoughts are constant, overwhelming, deeply distressing, severely impacting your life.
Or if there are thoughts of worthlessness or self-harm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then it's really important to reach out to a therapist or doctor. Therapies like CBT, ACT, DBT are specifically designed to help with these patterns and offer structured support. There's no shame in getting help.
Definitely not. Okay, so to wrap up, the key takeaway seems to be that negative self-talk is often learned based on distorted thinking, but it can be changed.
Absolutely. Through awareness, challenging those thoughts, reframing them, using mindfulness, and crucially, treating yourself with compassion, you have the power to reshape that inner narrative.
You really do. So if you're listening, maybe just start with one thing. Pick one awareness technique or try to spot one cognitive distortion you use. Small steps.
Exactly. Every step counts.
And maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Consider how that internal conversation, the way you speak to yourself, really lays the foundation for everything else, how you see the world, how you interact with it, what you believe you can do. So the question is, what's one small shift you could make in your inner dialogue starting today that might create the biggest positive ripple effect in your life? Something to think about.